There may not be a racing car as successful as the Ferrari 550 GTS that has anywhere near as complicated a history as our V12 does. Whereas cars like the Chrysler Viper and the Lister Storm that we've already driven were built up to be raced by both factories and privateers from the very beginning, Ferrari made claims that the Ferrari 550 Maranello was never intended to be raced. Certainly, Ferrari never did anything to make that happen. With that said, if they weren't going to, it was inevitable that somebody would, or in this case, somebodies. The 550 was developed for racing purposes by no fewer than 5 privateer teams, all built with different philosophies, and in most cases, for different purposes. While the road car debuted by Ferrari in 1996, it took 3 full years for a privateer team to build a race-ready car. In this case, French outfit Red Racing had developed the car for the GT3 class of the FFSA French GT Championship, a seemingly conservative goal for such an obviously capable base car. The car was sold to XL Racing, who turned the 550 GT into the 550 XL and campaigned it through the 2003 24 Hours of Le Mans in the GT category. The car was never particularly successful. Italtecnica, who assisted with the 550 XL project, also created the 550 Millennio in 2000, designed to go racing in the FIA GT Championship, for the first time as a proper GT1 car. The car was perhaps most famously campaigned by Raffinelli both in Europe and the United States under ACO GTS regulations, resplendent in its bright green Olive Garden livery. A 4th bid to send the 550 racing was undertaken by Veith Racing in 2000, also destined for the FIA GT Championship for 4 years through 2005. Finally, however, in 2001, the Ferrari 550 Maranello motorsport saga struck gold. Prodrive, famous for, well, more than we can list here, had built the 550 GTS entirely independent of both the Ferrari factory and any other privateer effort. The car was commissioned by Care Racing Development, again destined for the 2001 FIA GT Championship as a GT class car, and through the end of the quote-unquote factory Prodrive effort in 2004, boy did it deliver. The car we're lapping today is that very Prodrive 550 GTS. This is the car that took a debut win in the 2001 FIA GT Championship. The car the BMS Scuderia Italia campaigned to 4 wins in 2002. The car that Prodrive used to wrestle the 2003 American Le Mans GTS trophy away from Corvette, and the car that won its class at the 24 Hours of Le Mans that same year. The car was no less dominant even as it aged. The 550 won the 2004 Le Mans Series class title, as well as the 24 Hours of Spa. The car even found success in Asia, with 2 class championships in the short-lived Japan Le Mans Challenge. Ultimately, the Ferrari 550 GTS was as good as it got in the early 2000s. As the Vipers and Listers aged, Prodrive had proven that their kit was the one to have. Truly, the best Ferrari racer that Ferrari never built. All right, everybody, that time again. Let's go lap the Nürburgring. As always, we've got cold tires, cold brakes, medium compound, quarter tank of fuel. As we start another 25 Ks, it's all Ferrari today. If you ask RSS, their GT1 pack, it's a Ferruccio 55. If you ask Prodrive, it's a 550 Maranello. If you ask Ferrari, it's not a race car. Down into turn 1. Needs a little extra lock here. Like to come back in full throttle there, and eventually we got there. First thing I notice as we try and build some operating temperature and some predictability in the car is how much more comfortable it feels on the brakes than any car we've driven so far, other than the Porsche, which had ABS. You can really whack the middle pedal down to almost 100% pressure and not feel like you're on the risk of, or on the limit of locking the front tires up, which I think will reflect down the road in our Sector 1 times, but that remains to be seen. Again, like the other RSS cars we've dealt with, it takes a little time to build that pressure, wide there and sliding, to build that pressure and that temperature in the tires. But once we do, the car is pretty predictable. Extra upshift there. Don't do that too often. A little deep on the brakes into the chicane, but we've got it tipped in nicely over the curbs. One too many curves there. First gear onto the Hotzenbach, or onto the Nordschleife. See if we get this right. Nope. Not really. Car kicks a little as we try and use up all the road on the exit. So, after noting the braking improvements that the Ferrari is offering us, the next thing I'll offer as an observation about the car is that it feels like an altogether more capable version of the Viper. Which makes a lot of sense, right? It's a big front-engine car. It's got a V12 up front. The Viper, of course, had the V10. The dynamics are very similar. The way it drives, the predictability. It's very pointed under braking. And in a way, it's a very point-and-shoot kind of car. It's all about the angles. Not quite flat through Schwedenkreuz there. Probably could have been if we wanted to be. But I wasn't really feeling that. So it's a car about angles. And what I mean by that is, if you get the car pointed in the right direction, it will do what you ask it to do. It won't rotate like the Lister, because the Lister, of course, was a mid-engine car. But if you get the car on the trajectory that you want it, and you respect the amount of power it has, it will do pretty much exactly what you want or need it to do. It's more compliant over the curbs, so there's a little more margin for error, which is never a bad thing. Didn't need that curb there. Short shift into third. To Kellenhart. Be another short shift here up into fourth. Lift, bigger lift than we had on the Lister, but more speed than we were able to carry in the Viper. Working those front tires awfully hard as always. A little more conservative here so we can be on line, which we are. Short shift into second. Lift the throttle on that right-hander there just so you don't kick the back end around with a little wheel spin. And over Breitscheid. At our bridge. Nice over X-Mula. Lots of bumps there as the inside of the corner comes to meet the car. This car is, like I said, really compliant. Oop, late on the brakes there into Bergwerk. We paid for it a little bit, but we were able to rotate the back of the car with just a little extra throttle. Like I said, it's not torquey, but lots of drivability in the power band. So we get for top speed here. Probably hold it in fifth gear. Drags it up the hill. Oh yeah, it just keeps dragging. This is fantastic. No reason to grab sixth gear there. Nice. Nice through Klostertal. Flat out through the right-hander there. This is such a good lap. Deep on the brakes into there, but we kept the nose of the car pinned, and it allowed us to make it back more or less to the apex. Into the carousel, nice and conservative. Probably should have been in second through there. You don't need the rotation because you're slower than the radius of the corner requires. You're just trying to hold it in the embankment. And then if you're in a too high a gear, the back end's going to kick around on you. Keeping it off the curbs. Again, this is the part of the lap where the Lister really excelled because it was a mid-engine car. So, if you don't drive it like the Lister, you'll be alright. It's just a very different driving style. And you'd expect to give up a little bit of time. We'll see in the results. But, that being said, it's a better car all around, and it's got plenty of downforce. So I wouldn't be surprised if we actually do pick up a little bit in some of the twisty bits relative to where the Lister is, regardless of the fact that we're dealing with, you know, a big V12 in the front of the car. Realistically, should probably be a little slower through that left-hander there, before the Flansgartens, but nice and conservative there through the jump there to try and keep the speed up over the crest of the hill. And we've done that. 5th gear, lift the throttle over the crest, and then thread the needle again. Oof. Didn't need that, that's for sure. There we go. Nice and smooth. Man, this car is just so smooth and predictable. Slower through Schwab and Schwanz. Kind of popped out the top, but it's so bumpy through there you can't really ever get the throttle down fully anyway. And with red hot front tires, try and find some grip through Galgenkalk and have it launch us down the Döttinger Höhe. Again, not holding my breath like I was in those first few episodes, but the arms are very tense because you're, again, just trying to get those angles and those trajectories exactly right. And the legs are pretty tense too because a ton of power, no driver aids. Just being very precise with your throttle inputs, which is not my strong suit, hence the tension. Adjustment of the glasses there. Head up into Hohenrhein. Tiergarten. Decided from here on out I'm not going to be stupid aggressive on the way up the hill there anymore on the brakes. Because you just never really get it back. Oh man, look at this lap time. Oh, I'm going to give the Porsche a run for the money. 8:09.4. That is how good the Ferrari 550 was. We did an 8:17 in the Viper, an 8:16 in the Lister. I had about a half a lap of practice in this thing, and 8 seconds. That is a remarkable lap time, and this car is just, it's such a joy to drive. I really, really enjoyed that lap. So next thing we're going to do, as always, get some numbers here. I cannot wait to see how it stacks up, not just against the GT1 cars in the sort of secondary era, 1999 and on, but especially the Porsche. It didn't drive anything like the Porsche. It didn't handle or behave anything like the Porsche. But you're talking about 5 years of development in a different class, right? Prodrive nailed this, and I cannot wait to see how it stacks up against that 911 GT1 from 1998. So join me in just a minute, and we'll have that up in the concluding segment of our Nürburgring leaderboard. So let's talk Ferrari laps. I don't need to tell you, that was a hell of a lap. I'm not that good a driver, but the Ferrari altogether a much better package than the Lister. That's 2 years of development. That's Prodrive versus a very small Lister squad. That's a factory team versus a factory Lister team, but they're not Prodrive. They didn't have Ferrari drivers. Very, very different approach. So the end result, when you break it down by sector, the Ferrari, 2.5 seconds quicker than the Lister, right off the bat in the first sector. Middle sector, 2 full seconds quicker than the Lister. Final sector, 2.5 seconds when you get to the end of the lap. Now that final sector, obviously, big top speed gains from the Ferrari. 10 kilometers an hour, 5.5 miles an hour. So a lot of that time is going to be gained right there down the Döttinger Höhe. The Lister itself had some strengths through the twisty portion of the end of the lap because it was a mid-engine car. It rotated much better, turned in much better. It was a more reactive car, but the Ferrari just did everything better. It got on the power better. It pulled out of corners better. When you had it lined up properly for the exit of corners, it just took off like a rocket. It was more compliant over curbs. It was more forgiving. It was just altogether a better package, and that owes to having a better base package and better development from the factory. Looking at average throttle percentage, bizarrely, or surprisingly, this is the first drop-off we've seen. So after 6 full years of development from the McLaren, the gains made to the Porsche, the gains made to the Viper, and the gains made to the Lister, this is the first time it's dropped off. And I think we see a peak with the Lister at 73.5% compared to 73% for the Ferrari because the Lister had a little more weight back towards the rear. The Ferrari was more powerful, so that makes some sense, but I think the rest of that is explained by the Lister having that rearward weight shift and having a little more confidence for the driver to come back in the throttle harder as he comes out of corners. Now, obviously, 0.5% is not a huge deal, but it's still noticeable and was noticeable during the lap. So that's all I've got to say about the Ferrari. Like I said, it was a hell of a lap. This is a great car. I'm interested to see the next video where we're going to take on the Ferrari F575. This was the factory Ferrari answer to the F550 from Prodrive. It was never as successful in the real world. It was a similar base car, but the execution was just slightly different, and I think it's going to tell a lot as to just how good the Ferrari F550 was in its day during the mid-2000s in the FIA GT Championship. So we'll see you, everybody, for the next video, and thanks for watching.